Here is Romans chapter 11 verses 28 to 30 from the New International Version, reads. 28. As far as the gospel is concerned, they are enemies for your sake, but as far as election is concerned, they are loved on account of the patriarchs. 29. For God's gifts and his call are irrevocable. 30. Just as you who were at one time disobedient to God have now received mercy as a result of their disobedience. To expound on these verses, it's important to understand the context and the message Paul is conveying in his letter to the Romans. Paul, the apostle, is addressing a complex relationship between Jews and Gentiles in the context of God's salvation plan. The dichotomy of relationship. Verse 28, Paul speaks of the Jews as enemies for your sake in relation to the gospel. This implies that the rejection of the gospel by many Jews has opened the way for Gentiles, non-Jews, to receive it. However, he quickly contrasts this by stating that they are loved on account of the patriarchs. This love refers to the covenant God made with the patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and signifies that the Jews are still beloved by God because of his promises to their ancestors. God's faithfulness and gifts. Verse 29, the phrase "for God's gifts and his call are irrevocable" highlights the unchanging nature of God's promises and his faithfulness. The gifts and calling of God to Israel are permanent, reaffirming that God has not abandoned his covenant with them, despite their current unbelief. The role of mercy. Verse 30, this verse reminds the Gentiles of their past disobedience to God and how they have now received mercy. Paul is drawing a parallel here, suggesting that just as the Gentiles who were once disobedient received mercy, so now the Jews, who are currently in disobedience, by rejecting the gospel, have the opportunity to receive mercy as well. In summary, these verses emphasize the depth of God's mercy and his faithfulness to his promises. Paul is pointing out that the temporary unbelief of Israel serves a greater purpose in God's plan, which is to extend mercy to all, both Jews and Gentiles. It's a message about the inclusive nature of God's salvation, and a reminder that God's purposes in election and mercy transcend human understanding and failures.